My parents thought I'd never know. They believed I would stay quiet. They emptied the trust fund my grandparents left for me and poured it into my sister's life as if it were theirs to give. They smiled with confidence, sure of their secret. But the morning the bank called, everything shattered.
I'm Olivia Mercer.
My story begins not with love, not with ambition, but with betrayal. At 25, I learned the truth. The trust fund meant for me. $27 million my grandparents built from a lifetime of sacrifice and brilliant investments was gone, quietly drained. My parents funneled it all to Rebecca, my younger sister, the golden child. The discovery split my life in two before and after. That morning began like any other. The alarm shrieked at 5:45. Half asleep, I fumbled for my phone in the dark, already mapping out the endless deadlines of my job as a junior architect at Harman & Associates. Another ordinary day, or so I thought. Then the phone rang. An unknown number. Dawn calls rarely bring good news. For a second, I considered ignoring it, letting it fade to voicemail. Maybe if I had, I'd still be living inside the lie my family built. Maybe I'd still believe the story they fed me all my life. But I answered. Hello. My voice was groggy, half resentful. Miss Mercer? Olivia Mercer? The tone was precise, controlled. A man who carried weight in his words. This is William Kensington from First Atlantic Private Banking. I apologize for calling at this hour. I've been trying to reach you for several days. It concerns your grandparents' trust. My breath stalled. My grandparents' trust. The inheritance I'd been told was small, barely enough to cover my education. Spent long ago. Something I hadn't thought of in years. There must be a mistake, I said quickly, sitting up, my pulse spiking. That trust was used for college tuition. It's been closed for years. Silence. Too long. Just enough to make my heart pound in my chest. Miss Mercer, Kensington continued, according to our records, the trust in your name was valued at approximately $27 million. It was structured so that you would inherit it upon turning 25 or completing graduate school, whichever came first. Our records show you turned 25 last month. When we attempted to transfer control to you, we discovered, his voice faltered, unauthorized withdrawals. A series of transfers spanning the last 3 years. The room spun. My hand gripped the bed frame, knuckles white. That's not possible, I whispered. My parents told me it was gone. Kensington's voice lowered, deliberate. The original trust was significant, Miss Mercer. Your grandparents wanted to protect your future. They never disclosed the full amount, not until you came of age. Unfortunately, 93% of the trust has already been withdrawn. My stomach dropped. The number barely registered. By whom? I asked, though deep down, I already knew. The trust had co-trustees until your 20th birthday. You and your father, Judge Elliot Mercer. The withdrawals were signed under a power of attorney executed when you were 22. Do you recall signing such a document? The memory hit me like a blade. Christmas, senior year. The dining table glowing under golden light. My father sliding a stack of papers toward me. His voice calm, casual.
Routine paperwork. Leave.
Just signatures the bank needs before graduation. My mother topping off my eggnog while I signed without reading. Legal jargon I didn't care to decipher. My father, federal judge, the man I idolized, was the law itself in our home. His word was truth. His approval, everything. Now I understood what I had signed. My voice cracked. Where did the money go? Kensington's hesitation felt heavy. I heard his fingers tapping across a keyboard, the faint breath through the line. The funds were redirected into another account within our institution, he said carefully. A trust established for Rebecca Mercer. Rebecca. My sister.
22. Perfect. Brilliant.
Stanford medical student.
The pride of the family.
The silence on my end spoke louder than words. Miss Mercer, I should add, several markers triggered our fraud detection systems. While the power of attorney appears valid, the timing, the amounts, the patterns, they raise red flags. Can it be recovered? My voice startled me.
Steady.
Cold. That depends, he admitted. If the power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses, or if the use of funds violated the trust's intent, there could be grounds for recovery. But that would involve legal action against the co-trustee. My breath caught. Against my father. The man who raised me. The man whose approval I'd chased all my life. A federal judge with friends in every corner of the legal system. My father. My family. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. I need to see everything. My voice came out steady, though my hands trembled in my lap. All the paperwork. Every transfer. Every signature. I want the whole truth in front of me. Of course, Kensington replied.
Calm.
Professional. But I caught a flicker of something in his tone, a weight that told me he already knew how devastating this would be. If you can come to our main branch this morning, I'll clear my schedule until noon. An hour later, I was seated inside a conference room that smelled faintly of polish and disinfectant. The table was mahogany, gleaming under two bright fluorescent lights.
Cold.
Impersonal. And across its perfect surface lay my life, unraveled in stacks of paper. I stared at it all. My grandfather's precise signature establishing the trust the year I was born. My grandmother's will, written after her death when I was 12, reinforcing what was always meant to be mine. The power of attorney I'd signed without reading, sliding my father the key to everything. And the transfer records, dozens of them, systematic withdrawals bleeding the account dry, redirecting my inheritance piece by piece into Rebecca's trust. The largest withdrawal stopped me cold. $800,000. Just 3 months ago. The exact week Rebecca was accepted to Stanford Medical School. The exact week my parents whisked her off to Europe to celebrate. And me? I'd been left home. Someone has to water the plants, Liv. Besides, you've been so busy at the firm. That same week, I'd eaten instant ramen 4 nights in a row, calculating if I could make rent, juggling my student loan payments from a master's program I never needed loans for. The loans I thought were my burden to bear. Loans my grandparents had already covered, if only I'd been allowed to know. Kensington slid another envelope across the table. His tone softened. Your grandparents were clear about their intentions. This was to be given to you the moment you assumed control of the trust. I unfolded the letter with shaking hands. My grandmother's handwriting bloomed across the page, delicate loops and sharp strokes, unmistakably hers. I hadn't seen it in years. Yet my chest ached with recognition. My dearest Olivia, it began. If you're reading this, it means you've reached an important moment. These funds represent more than money. They represent freedom. We have always believed in you, in your quiet determination, your brilliance, your deep heart, even when you tried to hide it. This trust is meant to give you choices, to free you from fear, to allow you to live boldly, without compromise. Your parents do not know the full extent of this gift. That was deliberate. Your father has always had complicated ideas about wealth. We believed it best to keep this between us until you were ready. Remember, Olivia, buildings are not the only things that need strong foundations. Build your life on truth, courage, and compassion, and you will never be led astray. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. Her voice felt alive in those words. I traced her signature, my fingertip following the faint indentation her pen had pressed into the paper. I imagined her at the desk she loved, writing this while fighting the cancer that took her months later. She had written it for me to read at 22, for me to carry into adulthood. Instead, it had been hidden, smothered by the people who swore they loved me. Kensington's voice broke the silence. Miss Mercer, given what we've uncovered, I've already spoken with our legal team. They believe you have a strong case, should you choose to pursue action. My stomach nodded. Legal action? Against my father? Yes. His answer was careful, weighted. It would be challenging. Your father's reputation, his position as a federal judge. It complicates things.
The scrutiny would be immense.
But your grandparents' wishes are undeniable. The documents are clear. And the way this power of attorney was obtained raises serious concerns. I stacked the documents neatly, my movements mechanical, while my thoughts spun out of control. This wasn't just money. It wasn't even about money anymore. This was everything I thought I knew about my family, about loyalty, about love. My entire foundation cracked beneath me. "Thank you," I said finally, forcing calm into my tone. "I'll need time to process this." Kensington slid his card across the table. "For what it's worth," he added softly, "I knew your grandfather well. He was a man of principle. Integrity was everything to him. He would be devastated to know this happened." I slipped the card into my pocket, gathered the papers, stood on unsteady legs. The revolving doors released me into blinding sunlight. The sidewalk outside the bank was alive. Cars honking, commuters rushing, heels striking pavement in rapid rhythm. The city moved on, indifferent to the implosion of my world. My phone buzzed. A text from my boss. "Where are you?" "Deadlines today." Another from my mother. "Lunch next week, sweetie? Rebecca gets home Thursday."
Casual. Light.
Perfectly normal. And yet now tainted. Every word dripping with betrayal disguised as love. I froze in the current of strangers. They flowed around me like water around stone, all of them rushing toward lives untouched by the truth I'd just been handed. It wasn't just the money they'd stolen. It was truth.
It was trust.
It was years of struggle they'd watched me endure, knowing I was breaking under weight that wasn't mine to carry. And now it was my decision.
To fight.
To expose them. To rip apart the illusion of family I'd clung to. The world looked the same. The sun shone the same. People hurried the same. But nothing was the same. The Olivia Mercer, who answered her phone at 5:45 that morning, was gone. In her place stood someone else. Someone who knew betrayal. Someone who would never be the same again. The woman I had been that morning was gone, dissolved the moment William Kensington's voice crackled through my phone and the weight of those documents landed in my hands. In her place stood someone else. Someone stripped of illusions. Someone with a choice. I could confront them, demand answers, drag the truth into the light, and fight for what was mine. Or I could stay silent, walk away, protect whatever fragile shell of family remained. As I stepped back into the current of the city, letting the tide of strangers pull me forward, only one truth rang clear. Nothing would ever be the same. The foundation of my life had fractured, and from that rubble something new would eventually rise. I wasn't the dutiful daughter anymore. The girl who signed without reading, who trusted without question. I was Olivia Mercer, granddaughter of Eleanor and Robert Mercer. And for the first time in my life, I saw my family and myself with brutal clarity.
Truth is a weapon.
It destroys, but it also creates. It had torn down the family I thought I belonged to, but it had also revealed who I truly was. That afternoon, I stumbled back to work. My body moved through the motions, but my mind refused to follow. I sketched, measured, adjusted drawings, but it was all mechanical. My colleagues noticed the cracks. The Olivia they knew, the precise one, the detail-obsessed architect who never missed a line, was faltering. I stared blankly at renderings, made clumsy errors, flinched when addressed. "Rough night." Marcus, the senior architect, asked, his voice casual as he slid a set of revisions toward me. Red marks bled across the page like wounds. Something like that. I forced a smile. It felt jagged, like it might split my face in two. By 5, I couldn't keep up the act. I packed my bag, waved off an invitation to happy hour, and walked out into the fading light. The city hummed with life, but I moved through it like a ghost. My apartment greeted me with silence. One bedroom. Small, a little shabby, but mine. A space I had fought to create, filled with second-hand furniture I'd curated piece by piece. Once, it had been my pride. Proof that I could stand on my own, build a life with grit and restraint. Tonight, it mocked me. Every scuffed surface whispered of the years I had pinched pennies while Rebecca flew to Europe, drove her shiny new car, lived debt-free at Stanford. All paid for with money that should have been mine. I slipped into routine, changed clothes, heated leftovers, sifted through mail. A letter from my student loan servicer sat at the top, reminding me my deferment was ending. The irony twisted like a knife. My phone buzzed with messages I couldn't face. My parents, my boss, friends confirming weekend plans. The life I had constructed kept pressing forward, demanding attention, while I was still frozen in the moment my world split apart. By midnight, I gave up on sleep. The restless energy clawed at me, so I reached for what I knew best, sketching. Not buildings this time. Not blueprints or elevations. I sketched my family. A timeline. A structure of betrayal. I drew Eleanor and Robert, my grandparents. Self-made. Entrepreneurs who had built a manufacturing company from nothing and sold it for a fortune. They had worked, saved, sacrificed. And they had believed in me. I drew Elliot, their son. My father. Brilliant law student turned federal judge, the youngest in the state's history. A man admired by many. Feared by more. I drew Caroline, my mother. The elegant socialite, polished and calculating, whose family connections smoothed my father's rise into power. And then there were the daughters.
Me.
Olivia. The steady one. The practical one. The daughter who followed the rules, choosing architecture, because my father convinced me environmental design was frivolous. And Rebecca. The chosen one. Brilliant. Charismatic. 3 years younger. Every ambition of hers was celebrated. Every step paved for success. As I sketched, I mapped it like a building. Load-bearing walls. Cracks in the foundation. Stress points. The structure of our family revealed itself in brutal clarity. The signs had always been there. Rebecca sent to Honduras for a medical volunteer program, while my summer internship was brushed aside as enough. Rebecca gifted a Mercedes at graduation, while I received a used Toyota. Rebecca told she could dream, reach, push higher. I was told to be prudent, practical, realistic. And I believed it. I accepted my place. Because medicine saves lives, I told myself, while architecture only shelters them. Her future deserved more. My ambitions were less worthy. I had swallowed that lie for years, never questioning why I carried student debt while Rebecca floated free. Now, staring at my sketches, a new question pulsed in my veins. Had this betrayal been planned all along? Or had it grown slowly, quietly justified over time? Did they look at their daughters, the steady one, the golden one, and decide resources were better spent on her? Or had they simply convinced themselves that stealing from me was somehow for the greater good? By dawn, my desk was covered. My sketches had become a map. Every date, every withdrawal, every choice that revealed the truth. A blueprint of betrayal. And for the first time, I could see the architecture of my family for what it really was, a design built to break me. That I had written everything down. Every memory. Every subtle reminder that my worth had always been measured against Rebecca's. Every moment when their words, sometimes direct, sometimes implied, told me I was less. As the first thin light of morning poured through my window, brushing gold across the chaos of pages scattered on my floor, the truth crystallized. This wasn't just about money. It had never really been about money. It was about worth. About whose dreams were nurtured and whose were dismissed. About who was trusted with opportunity and who was told to be satisfied with less. My parents hadn't only stolen my inheritance. They had stolen my sense of entitlement to dream. They had trained me to shrink, to believe that practicality was my natural strength, that modest ambitions were mine by choice. In reality, they had built me into that version of myself. They had written my script, and I had played the role gratefully, just to hear their faint applause. The realization hit like fire and ice at once, devastating, but strangely liberating. If my understanding of my family had been a lie, then maybe my understanding of myself was too. Maybe my limits weren't natural. Maybe they had been imposed. My phone buzzed against the desk, jarring me out of thought. My mother's name lit up the screen. For a heartbeat, I imagined answering, throwing the truth at her like a blade. But the architect in me knew better. You don't build confrontation on unstable ground. You lay the foundation first. You plan the structure. You make it unshakable. I silenced the call, sat down at my computer, typed, asset recovery attorney. By noon, I had my first consultation scheduled. Catherine Wu, specialist in fiduciary breach cases. Her website carried a quote from Theodore Roosevelt: "No man is above the law, and no man is below it." At 2, I would see Gabriel Martinez, a lawyer known for winning high-profile inheritance battles. And by 4:30, Diane Lockhart, a former prosecutor who'd made a career out of dismantling authority figures who abused their power. I called in sick to work. My first sick day in 3 years. Then I prepared. I organized the bank documents by date, copied my grandmother's letter, and drafted a clean, unemotional summary of the family dynamic, the foundation of the theft. Each page stacked neatly, a fortress of proof. Catherine Wu's office sat high in a downtown tower, sleek and minimal, glass and steel cut against the city skyline. Inside, it was cold elegance. She listened as I laid everything out. My voice sounded distant, like someone else's. She wrote notes, her face unreadable, until I said the words, "My father is a federal judge." Her pen paused. She repeated the words slowly, like weighing the gravity of them. "That complicates matters." I finished her thought. Because of his connections. Because of the attention. She gave a single nod.
Exactly.
Cases like this rarely remain private. You should be prepared for exposure. Not all of it kind. I told her I understood. She leaned forward slightly, her tone even. "The documentation is strong. The trust was explicit. The power of attorney looks questionable. There are grounds for legal action." But I felt the weight in that pause. "But these cases are not simple, Ms. Mercer. They're long, draining, painful. The burden will fall on you to prove that your father's actions were a breach of fiduciary duty, not simply a reasonable redistribution of family resources. Even though the trust named me specifically, your father will argue the power of attorney gave him authority, that his decisions were investments for the family, a daughter pursuing medicine, a physician versus an architect. He'll frame it as protecting the greater good." Her words pierced, not because they were unexpected, but because I had already whispered those same arguments to myself in the dark hours of morning. "So, you're telling me to accept it, to let the theft stand?" Her face softened. "I'm telling you to understand what you'd be walking into. This isn't just legal. It's war. Against your father. Against your family. And wars like this, they leave scars." Her question landed heavy. "Are you prepared for that?" I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken. Was I ready to cut ties? To drag my family's secrets into the light? To risk losing Rebecca, who may not have even known the truth? Finally, I breathed. "I need time." "That's wise." She nodded, closing her file. Decisions like this can't be made from raw emotion. The other consultations followed. Gabriel Martinez at 2. Diane Lockhart at 4:30. Both saw the strength of my case. Both warned of the same costs. Different strategies, different timetables, but the same refrain. If you pursue this, you must be willing to bear the fallout. The man you're challenging isn't just your father. He's a federal judge. By nightfall, I had 3 legal opinions stacked in front of me. 3 paths forward. And one truth I couldn't escape. No matter what I chose, there was no going back. The decision would not just alter my future. It would shatter the family I thought I knew. The city glowed gold as the sun slid between glass towers, turning steel into fire. I walked beneath it all, the weight of choice pressing down on me like stone. My phone buzzed in my bag. A message from my mother lit up the screen. "Olivia, please call us. We're worried about you." Another followed almost instantly. "Your sister is coming home this weekend. We'd love to have family dinner on Sunday."
Potruast.
Your favorite. The casual warmth of it made my stomach twist.
Potruast.
As if a favorite meal could erase what they had done. As if I hadn't just uncovered the truth, that they had gutted my future and handed it to Rebecca like a gift-wrapped present. They had stolen what was mine, watched me scrape and struggle, and now they invited me back to the table like nothing had happened. I stopped on a crowded street corner, people brushing past me, lives moving forward. Mine felt like it had frozen. But in that stillness, I decided. Not about court. Not yet. But about truth. I would no longer play along with their fiction. I would no longer pretend the uneven scales in our family were natural, or fair, or even remotely just. I typed one word. No. Then I shut off my phone. My hand trembled as I slipped it back into my bag. I walked home through the fading light, a strange calm building inside me. That night, I sketched again. But not a map of betrayal this time. A plan. A design. A blueprint for independence. My life, rebuilt not on the foundation they had poured for me, but on one I would carve with my own hands. The cage they had built for me, dressed in duty and modesty, stood wide open now. The question wasn't whether I would leave. It was how far I would fly once I did. Sunday loomed like a storm cloud. After my curt refusal, the messages multiplied. My mother's voice filled my voicemail. First soft, then anxious, then hard as steel. My father needed no such progression. His single text landed like a gavel. Family matters should be discussed in person. We expect you Sunday. Not a request. A decree. I prepared like I was heading into battle. I pulled credit reports, confirming my finances had been clean, until their hands reached in. I upped my retirement contributions, a symbolic declaration that my future was now mine. I studied renters' rights, memorized the terms of my lease. Each step was a wall, a brace, a steel beam for the structure of the life I would build apart from theirs. By dawn on Sunday, I had my answer. I would pursue recovery. But not yet, not before giving them one last chance to look me in the eye and admit what they had done. Maybe it was naive. But I needed to know I had given them that chance before I set fire to everything. I dressed with precision. A charcoal skirt, a white blouse, hair pinned in a clean chignon. Not the obedient daughter, but the professional woman they had never truly seen. Around my neck, the silver pendant my grandmother had left me, billed with integrity. I touched it once, like armor. The drive to Lakeshore Heights felt surreal. I could have taken it blindfolded. Every street carried ghosts. My science fair at the elementary school, my father's steady hand on the bike handles at the park, the library where I spent hours while my mother drifted between charity meetings. But even those memories were shifting. Had his lessons been love or obligation? Had my independence been nurtured, or was it just exclusion dressed as freedom? And then the house. The Mercer home, standing at the end of its manicured cul-de-sac, colonial and commanding. Perfect lawns, perfect flowers. Success wrapped in subtle arrogance. My father's black Audi and my mother's silver Mercedes gleamed in the circular drive. But it was the new car that froze me. The red BMW convertible, polished like blood in the afternoon sun. Rebecca's. Stanford's golden child had come home. I eased my battered Toyota in behind the line of luxury. The contrast was almost too perfect. A metaphor parked in steel and paint. Before I could knock, the door opened. My mother stood there, every detail calculated. Ash blonde hair perfectly colored, body honed by Pilates and tennis, her clothes tailored to whisper wealth. Her face a mask, warmth at the surface, disapproval just beneath. Olivia, darling. Finally. We were beginning to worry. Her air kiss brushed my cheek. I didn't return it. Hello, Mother. My voice was flat. I stepped inside. I hadn't wanted to come. I had said no. But apparently, my absence would have been more disruptive to their carefully staged illusion than my reluctant presence. My mother's smile faltered the second she heard my tone. She drew back, just slightly, as though sensing something sharp beneath the surface. Don't be difficult, Olivia. Your sister's home. Your father's been working too hard. We only wanted a pleasant family meal. Is that too much to ask? The irony nearly made me laugh. I was being accused of ruining their little theater by daring to acknowledge reality. If I weren't so furious, it might have been comical. That depends. I said, stepping past her into the polished foyer. On what else might be asked of me tonight? My father appeared then, emerging from his study with the practiced ease of a man stepping into his courtroom. Reading glasses perched on his nose, the Wall Street Journal folded neatly under his arm. 62, tall, broad-shouldered, the weight of authority still clinging to him like a second skin. He didn't just enter a room. He claimed it. Olivia, he said, his voice clipped, official. Good of you to join us. Your sister just arrived from the airport. She's freshening up.
No embrace. No worms.
Not even the courtesy of a handshake. My father had never been affectionate, but tonight the distance felt colder, deliberate. Not boundaries. Disconnection. Not a father to a daughter, but a judge, weighing a case file. Judge Mercer, I said evenly. The title was intentional. A tiny rebellion. His eyes narrowed, just slightly, but he let it pass. The living room was unchanged. Neutrals and symmetry. Fresh flowers in crystal vases. Silver frames lined across a polished table. I walked straight to the photographs, studying them with new eyes. Rebecca, smiling in her white coat at Stanford. Rebecca with our parents at graduation. Rebecca sun-kissed on a yacht, hair glinting gold in the Mediterranean light. My life, reduced to the occasional token frame. My architecture degree. A professional headshot. One lonely shot from last Christmas, staged like an afterthought. You were featured in Design Quarterly, my father remarked casually as he poured himself a scotch. That riverfront project. They called it an innovative approach to sustainable materials. Yes, I said, turning from the photographs, though the article didn't credit the junior team who actually did the work. My eyes locked on his. Proper attribution matters. Don't you think? His hand stilled in mid-pour. The faintest hesitation. Then the liquid flowed again, amber against crystal. Recognition comes with time and position, Olivia. You know that. And some positions, I pressed, my words precise, are considered more deserving of recognition and support than others. Is that what you're suggesting? Our eyes met. His, steady but wary now. I'm pointing out that career advancement follows predictable patterns. Patience is required. That's how the world works. And honesty, I countered, my voice sharpening, is required in fiduciary obligations. Isn't it? The tumbler struck the cart with a sharp click. For a moment, the room held its breath. If you have something to say, my father said, voice low, tight, say it directly. I didn't raise you to speak in riddles. No, I said quietly. You raised me not to question authority, especially yours. Honestly, Olivia, my mother interjected, her smile stretched thin as porcelain. What's gotten into you? Your father was paying you a compliment. Was he? I shot back. Or was he reminding me to know my place?
To wait.
To be grateful for whatever scraps of recognition fell from the table, while more favored children received everything up front. The silence was thick, electric, broken only by the sound of footsteps descending the stairs. Rebecca. She glided into the doorway like a golden apparition, smile wide until she felt the atmosphere. Then, hesitation. Confusion. She was radiant, always had been. Our mother's delicate features, our father's confidence. Blonde hair falling in perfect waves. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my rent, a diamond-studded watch flashing on her wrist. Liv, she exclaimed, crossing the room with open arms. I've missed you. How's the architecture world? Still saving the planet one sustainable building at a time. I stepped back, dodging her hug. The shift in her face, hurt, bewildered, was instant. It's challenging, I said evenly. Especially when you're paying off student loans on a junior architect salary.
But you wouldn't know about that.
Would you? Rebecca blinked, glancing at our parents. What's going on? That's what I'd like to know, my mother said quickly, voice tight with irritation. Your sister arrived in some kind of mood. My father stayed silent, eyes fixed on me with the same cold, appraising stare he probably used on witnesses when their testimony veered from the expected. Perhaps we should eat, he said finally. Discussions are always more productive with proper sustenance. An excellent deflection, I said. But I'm not hungry for pot roast. I let the words hang, then added, I'm hungry for explanations. Rebecca frowned. Explanations for what? I turned fully toward her, no longer hiding the truth. Do you know where the money for your education came from, Becca? For those summers in Europe? For that watch on your wrist? That red car in the driveway? She stared at me, incredulous. Our parents, obviously. Dad's salary, their investments. Same place your education came from. No, I said softly, the word cutting through the air like a blade. Not the same place at all. My father set his glass down, the sound deliberate. Olivia, he said, voice heavy, whatever concerns you have can be addressed privately. There's no need to create drama at a family dinner, my mother said, her pearls trembling against her throat. Drama? I echoed, my voice low but cutting. Is that what you call it when a daughter finds out she's been robbed of nearly $3 million by her own parents? The silence was instant, heavy, absolute. Rebecca froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. My mother clutched her pearls tighter, like a caricature of guilt. My father didn't flinch. His expression stayed cold, controlled, calculating, the judge slipping into his role. You've been speaking to William Kensington, he said flatly.
Yes.
Apparently, Grandma Eleanor's letter was supposed to reach me 3 years ago. I let the words hang. Strange how that never happened. Rebecca's head snapped toward me. Letter? What letter?
What's going on?
I didn't look at her. My gaze stayed locked on my father. Would you like to explain, Judge Mercer, or shall I? His jaw tightened. His words came slow, deliberate. Your grandmother had certain notions about distribution that were impractical, detrimental to this family's welfare. Impractical? I repeated. Is that your legal opinion? Because First Atlantic's lawyers have another word for it, misappropriation. You don't understand the complexities, my mother began, her voice sharp with panic. Complexities. I cut in. Rebecca's tuition covered in full while I carry loans the size of a mortgage. She's handed summers in Europe. I'm handed debt. Explain the complexity in that, mother. Rebecca sat down hard on the sofa, her face drained of color. I don't understand. What trust? What money? I softened, just slightly, when I turned to her. Grandma and Grandpa left me a trust. Nearly $3 million. I was supposed to take control at 25 or after grad school. But instead, our parents diverted almost all of it to you. They used a power of attorney I signed without knowing what it meant. Her face shifted, confusion to disbelief, disbelief to horror. That's not possible. Mom? Dad? Tell me it's not true. It's not that simple, my father said, tone measured, almost rehearsed. Resources must be allocated based on potential return. Rebecca's medical education represents an investment. In your favorite daughter. I cut him off. Just admit it. You chose. You built this family's mythology on Rebecca. Her intellect. Her ambition. Her worth. And when my inheritance threatened to challenge that story, you simply redirected it. Kept the golden child shining, left the other to struggle in the shadows. You make it sound malicious, my mother cried. We were thinking of the family's welfare. Were you? My voice was steady, almost calm. Or were you making sure the daughter you valued had every advantage, while the one you deemed less worthy was forced to prove herself with nothing? Rebecca shot to her feet. Stop it. Just stop. I never asked for this. I didn't know about any trust. This isn't about you, Becca. I raised a hand to quiet her. Not directly. You've been shaped by them too, just from the other side. You were told you deserved everything. I was told to deserve nothing. I turned back to my parents. I came here today hoping, foolishly, that you might give me something. An explanation. A justification that made sense of this betrayal. Something better than the truth staring me in the face, that you valued one daughter's future over the other's. My father's voice was ice. You're being melodramatic. Financial decisions require pragmatism, not emotion. Allocation is a practical matter, not a judgment of personal worth. Except it wasn't yours to allocate, I snapped. That trust was mine. Your pragmatism was illegal. A breach of fiduciary duty. Fraud. His eyes narrowed. Be very careful with accusations you can't prove. The judge had replaced the father completely, particularly ones that could destroy you. I reached into my bag, laid the evidence on the table, copies of the trust, the transfer records, Grandma's letter. I can prove every word. The only question is whether I'll do it in court. The air in the room shifted. Dinner had become a battlefield. You would sue your own parents? My mother's voice was barely audible. Destroy your father's reputation? Tear this family apart over money. This family is already torn apart, I said quietly. It just looked whole because I stayed silent. Because I didn't know the truth. I looked around at them. These strangers I had trusted for 25 years. And this isn't about money. It's about betrayal. About being told my life, my worth, my future didn't matter. I gathered the documents back into my bag. My voice was steady. Final. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. Restore what was taken. Acknowledge the damage.
Commit to change.
If you don't, then I'll pursue every legal avenue to reclaim what's mine, no matter the consequences. My father's gaze was glacial. His voice a warning. Consider very carefully before you make threats you cannot take back. My advice, Olivia, my father said, his tone like polished stone, is to tread carefully. The legal system is a complex machine. Outcomes are uncertain. The process itself can leave wounds deeper than the ones you imagine you've already suffered. The warning was clear. Not just about the law, but about him. His connections. His influence. The silent threat that even truth might not be enough against a man like Judge Elliot Mercer. But instead of fear, I felt resolve harden inside me. The more he flexed his power, the more certain I became of mine. I've thought very carefully, I replied, steady, unshaken. Have you? Because the regret in this story isn't mine. It belongs to you. I turned. My footsteps echoed through the foyer. Liv, wait. Rebecca's voice cracked behind me. We need to talk. I didn't know. I stopped, looked back at her. Her face was pale, her eyes wet with panic. And in them, for the first time, I saw something raw. Not arrogance. Not superiority. Just confusion.
Fear.
A sister caught in the crossfire of a war she never asked for. I know you didn't, I said softly. This isn't about you, Becca. It's about them and the choices they made. When you're ready to talk without their script in your mouth, call me. And then I walked out of the house that had raised me. My childhood home. But the truth was, it had never been a home. Just a stage set. A careful fiction my parents had curated, and I had believed. That night, as I lay awake in my apartment, I felt both hollow and whole. Empty from the loss of the family I thought I had, but strengthened by the clarity of the family I actually had.
None.
And in that void lay something powerful, freedom. I realized the architect in me already knew this truth. Every great renovation begins with demolition. Sometimes you must tear down the structure, strip away the facade, expose the rot, before you can build something stronger. The week after the confrontation, I moved with precision. A plan. A blueprint. I called Catherine Wu, the attorney whose no-nonsense clarity had resonated with me the first time we met. We sat at her office, my trust documents spread across her conference table like crime scene photos. Your situation is clean in legal terms, Catherine said, adjusting her glasses as she flipped through the pages. The breach of fiduciary duty is obvious. The paper trail is strong. The power of attorney was likely obtained through misrepresentation. Legally, this is solid. She paused. The weight of her hesitation was deliberate. But I prompted. Your father is Judge Elliot Mercer, she continued. His influence runs deep. He won't preside over this directly, but judges protect their own. You should expect procedural delays. Aggressive defense strategies. Pressure in places you won't see coming. I nodded. None of it surprised me. I understand. What's our first step? Her strategy was surgical. Start with a formal demand letter. Lay out the breach, the evidence, the remedies we expected. Full restoration of the trust funds, with interest, legal fees, and damages. If they resisted, we'd move toward litigation. Step by step. Brick by brick. But to build a case, we needed more than numbers. We needed context. Patterns.
History.
We'll need a timeline, Catherine explained. Not just the transfers. The story behind them. When did the favoritism begin? What other financial manipulations occurred? Any statements they made that show knowledge of the trust's intent. So, I became an investigator in my own life. Digging through old records like an archaeologist unearthing bones. I requested my undergraduate and graduate financial aid files. I combed through years of emails. Conversations about tuition, living expenses, career choices. I cataloged every gift, every disparity, every whispered instruction disguised as advice. The pattern screamed from the page. An email from my father. Be practical, Olivia. The loans would cripple you. Your mother, and I can only do so much. Another to Rebecca. Don't worry about money, Becca. Some investments are worth it. Your education is our top priority. On my 20th birthday, a $500 stipend for professional clothing. On hers, a European summer. In my inbox, warnings about debt, cautions against unnecessary ambition. In hers, encouragement to chase dreams, reassurances that money was no obstacle. And buried in the financial aid forms, proof that my parents had always known. They had declared the inheritance. They had signed as trustees. All while telling me resources were tight. The story was no longer a suspicion.
It was documented fact.
I assembled it into a digital archive, neat and meticulous. Chronological. Thematic. Annotated with the precision of an architect drafting blueprints. When I placed it all in front of Catherine, she studied the evidence carefully. Her confidence grew with every page. This, she said, tapping the stack, is powerful. It doesn't just show money moving. It shows intent, bias, a deliberate pattern of valuing one child's future over another. Judges may dismiss numbers, but they can't dismiss a story. Will it be enough? I asked quietly. In a normal case? Absolutely. She leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp. But in your case, it gives us leverage. Your father can't afford this to go public. Not the fraud. Not the favoritism. Not the hypocrisy. The demand letter was drafted, word by word, like a blade being sharpened. Precise. Unforgiving. It called for everything taken. Every cent of the trust. With interest. With legal fees. With damages. The first strike had been made. And this time, I wasn't a daughter begging for recognition. I was a woman demanding justice. Before I let Catherine send the letter, the legal grenade that would rip through the fragile facade of my family, I did something I knew wasn't necessary for the case, but essential for me. I called my sister. Rebecca answered on the first ring. Her voice was soft, cautious, like she'd been holding her breath for days.
Leave.
I've been trying to reach you. I know, I said evenly. I needed space. Time to think. I didn't let emotion color my tone. I spoke like an attorney laying out facts. I'm about to take formal legal action against our parents. But before I do, I wanted to talk to you directly. The silence that followed was thick. Not hostile. Just heavy. Like the weight of years we had never questioned pressing down between us. They're saying it's complicated, she said at last. That there were arrangements you didn't understand. That they were just trying to do what was best for both of us in the long run. The script. The same narrative I'd heard my whole life. You don't understand, Olivia. I expected it. I braced for it. Do you believe that? I asked. Her pause stretched longer this time. I could hear her inhale, the small tremor in her breath. I don't know what to believe, she whispered. I never asked where the money for my tuition came from. I just accepted it. Because you were raised to. I said gently. You were taught that you deserved every advantage, and I was taught to be grateful for scraps. Her voice cracked. Was it really that obvious? That blatant? In retrospect, yes. My words came slow, deliberate. They never said it outright. But the message was clear. I was practical, dependable, safe. You were brilliant, exceptional, full of potential. Those weren't just descriptions, Becca. They were assignments of value. And value determined investment. Her breath caught, jagged, as though she were swallowing back tears. I never saw it like that. You weren't meant to, I said. The story worked because neither of us questioned it. She was quiet again. Then, softly, what happens now? I didn't hesitate. Catherine will send a formal demand letter. It lays out the breach of fiduciary duty and demands restoration of everything they took. They'll have 14 days to respond before we move to civil court. And my tuition? Her voice faltered on the word. The money they already spent on Stanford? There it was, the heart of her fear. I couldn't blame her. She was 3 years into a brutal medical program built on stolen ground. If they had been honest from the start, I said slowly, if they had told me the inheritance existed but argued that some should go to your education, we could have talked. We could have made choices as a family. But instead, they lied. They manipulated. They stole. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They're terrified, Liv. Dad hasn't slept. Mom cries every night. They think you're going to destroy everything. They already did, I replied, steady, unflinching. The destruction began the day they decided one daughter's future mattered more than the others. Another silence stretched long between us. Then Rebecca's voice, trembling but determined. Can we meet? Just us.
No parents. No lawyers.
I need to hear the truth. From you. We agreed to meet the next evening at a coffee shop halfway between us. Neutral territory. A no-man's land for sisters trying to salvage something from the wreckage. She arrived before me, tucked in a quiet corner. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the designer dresses, the polished perfection. Instead, jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail.
No makeup.
She looked younger.
Softer.
More like the girl I grew up with before our parents decided who would be the star and who would be the shadow. I brought these, she said, sliding a folder across the table, without preamble. Inside, copies of her Stanford financial aid records. I flipped through the pages. Payment after payment. Over $320,000 in 3 years. Every cent drawn from the account tied directly to my grandparents' trust. I didn't know, she said, her voice raw, her hands shaking. I swear to you, Liv, I thought it was from savings. From investments. They always told me education was their priority. For you? I said quietly. Not for me. Her eyes brimmed. This time the tears fell. I see that now. I see things I didn't want to see before. I nodded, scanning the records, folding them into my mental case file. These will help. They prove the pattern. I can't testify against them, she said quickly, swiping at her cheeks. I can't sit in a courtroom and tear them apart. But I also can't pretend this is okay. What they did to you is wrong. So deeply wrong. I'm not asking you to testify, I reassured her. These documents speak louder than words. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it hovered above mine before finally resting there. Then tell me, Liv, what can I do to make this right? Between us? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on justice, on building my case brick by brick, that I hadn't stopped to consider reconciliation. My sister, the unknowing beneficiary of my parents' betrayal, was asking for something no court could deliver. I don't know, I admitted quietly. I'm still trying to process what it means that every advantage you had, every opportunity one was denied, came from what was meant for me. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I can't undo my education. I can't give it back. No, I said. You can't. And I wouldn't ask you to walk away from medicine. That's not the point. For the first time in years, there was no rivalry in the space between us.
No hierarchy.
Just two sisters, staring at the cost of a lie neither of us had asked for. Then tell me, what is the point? What do you want from me? Rebecca's voice trembled, but there was no defensiveness in it. Just pain. Just truth. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for an answer. And for the first time, I stopped seeing her as the golden child, the girl who'd been handed everything without question. Instead, I saw her as something else. Another victim. A daughter pulled into the same manipulative machine, placed on a pedestal she never asked to stand on, elevated at my expense, without ever realizing the cost. I want you to see me, I said finally. My voice was quiet but firm. Not as the reliable sister. Not as the one who doesn't need help, who's expected to carry on without support. Not as the architect with modest dreams standing in the shadow of your medical career. I want you to see me as I am. Equally worthy. Equally valuable. Equally deserving of belief. Her face crumpled. The mask slipped.
Leave.
I always saw you that way, she whispered. You were the one who had it together. The one who never wavered. I was terrified of failing. Terrified I wouldn't measure up. And you seemed so sure. Her words cut deep. Because I wasn't sure. Not once. No, Becca, I said softly. I wasn't confident. I was conditioned. Taught not to ask for more. Taught that wanting more was selfish. Presumptuous. Unrealistic. My silence looked like certainty. My acceptance of limits looked like clarity. But it wasn't. It was resignation. The air between us shifted. The illusion of our childhood dissolved piece by piece. For hours we talked about the same events, the same memories, the same parental lessons, but from two radically different vantage points. For her, there had been relentless pressure. She was told she was special, exceptional, that her success had to justify the investment. For me, there had been ceilings, quiet limits, a subtle message that I should be satisfied with less. Both roles had been cages, one gilded, one rusted, but cages nonetheless. By the time we finally stood, there was no reconciliation, not yet, but there was understanding, a recognition that we had both been shaped by the same manipulation, a fragile truce built not on our parents' fiction, but on truth. I'll help however I can, Rebecca promised as we stepped out into the night. I can't take their side. Not anymore. Not after this. The next morning, Catherine sent the demand letter. A direct strike. By that afternoon, my father's attorney had called. They wanted a meeting. A settlement discussion. That's fast, Catherine said when she told me. They're worried about exposure, I guessed. Or stalling. Maybe even trying to hide assets. My trust in them was gone. Every motive suspect. We've already filed for injunctions, Catherine assured me. They can't move anything. If they're pushing for settlement, it's because they know their position is weak. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I lived in the in-between. On the surface, my routine looked unchanged. I went to work, sat in meetings, drafted designs. But inside, something seismic had shifted. Colleagues began noticing. In design reviews, I spoke up. I pushed for my ideas instead of letting them be shelved for future consideration. Marcus, the senior architect who had once dismissed my sustainable material proposals, now found himself challenged, point for point. You've changed, he remarked after a heated back and forth about reclaimed timber sourcing. 3 months ago, you would have let it go. 3 months ago, I replied, I believed patience would be rewarded. Recognition would come if I just kept my head down. But I've learned value isn't given. It's claimed. That change bled into everything. I began researching certifications I once thought were out of reach. I enrolled in an evening course on urban sustainability. At night, I sketched designs that spoke to my true passions, not the safe career path my father had carved out for me. Each step wasn't just professional. It was personal. A reclamation of more than stolen money. It was reclamation of self. of the life I might have lived if I hadn't been trained to expect less. As the settlement meeting drew closer, I knew it would feel like walking into a courtroom dressed as a family gathering. My parents would be there. Their lawyer, an old colleague of my father's, would be there. And Catherine, steady and precise, reminded me of one thing. This isn't about reconciliation. It's about restoration. About what is rightfully yours. I nodded. For once, I didn't confuse those two things. And to you, my listener, here's the truth I had to learn the hard way. We live in an age where tools exist to reclaim time, power, and possibility. Use them. Don't just scroll for distraction. Use technology for growth. Learn something new every day, whether it's through platforms like Coursera or Khan Academy. Use apps that sharpen your focus, that help you manage your time, that remind you of your goals. Leverage AI to brainstorm, to practice communication, to solve problems you've been carrying too long alone. Automate tasks that drain you. Let smart tools give you back hours you thought you'd lost. But above all, use it to connect. To reach someone meaningfully.
To teach. To guide.
To share knowledge. And protect yourself. Set limits. Guard your privacy. Step away from the screen when it begins to consume instead of empower. Because reclamation isn't only about money, or inheritance, or family. It's about the choices we make with the resources in front of us. Choices that either confine us to the cages we were given, or free us to build something entirely our own. Technology, when wielded with intention, can be a fierce ally. It can educate. It can cut through chaos. It can extend your reach to help others in ways once impossible. But it must be handled with balance. Let it sharpen your humanity, not erase it. Let it amplify your values, not replace them. Explore. Stay curious. Use these tools not just to live easier, but to live better. And then I set it aside. Because my story wasn't about apps or strategies. It was about remedy, justice, truth. Catherine's advice echoed in my mind. Keep your emotions steady. Let the evidence carry the weight. Sound advice. Professional. Measured. But as I laid out my clothes for the settlement meeting, I knew this wasn't just a legal confrontation. It was a declaration. I chose a structured blazer, tailored pants, and around my neck, my grandmother's silver pendant. It was armor, not against law, but against history. This was more than about money. It was about breaking free from a family system built on inequality, about rejecting the script I had been forced to live, about finally stepping into the woman I had chosen to become. The law offices of Brennan, Woodward, and Shaw sat high above the city, their 37th floor reception designed for intimidation. Ceilings that soared like cathedral vaults. Art displayed as if in a museum. Glass walls framing the city below, as if power itself was contained inside these windows. The message was unmistakable. This is where control lives. Enter at your peril. Catherine was unmoved. Her stride was calm, steady, unimpressed. Standard theater, she murmured as an assistant in a tailored suit escorted us toward conference room C. They're hoping the setting itself will soften you, make you pliable. It won't, I told her. And I meant it. Inside, the room was an exhibition of privilege. A long Brazilian rosewood table, chairs of leather that whispered wealth, crystal pitchers of water refracting light like diamonds. A stage for negotiations disguised as civility. We were first to arrive. Catherine's strategy. Let them walk into our space. Let them feel late. Small psychological advantages matter. I spent the minutes reviewing the evidence again. Not because I needed to. Every document, every transfer, every date, every dollar amount was already carved into my memory. This was about control. About channeling raw emotion into precision. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened. Lawrence Brennan entered first. Silver hair. Brooks Brothers suit. The casual confidence of a man who had spent his career being deferred to. He carried the polished ease of someone who had always won. He had once been my father's partner. Now he was his shield. My father followed. His face locked in judicial control. No expression. only authority. A mask I had seen him wear from the bench now turned on me, his own daughter. My mother came last, her beauty refined, her face arranged in dignified sorrow, and Hermes' scarf draped with care. Jewelry subtle, not showy. She wanted to appear wounded but composed, a portrait of maternal suffering.
No, Rebecca.
I had wondered if she would come, as support for them, or as quiet solidarity with me. But her absence was its own message, neutrality, a recognition that no matter the outcome, this conflict would split the foundation of our family forever. No introductions were offered. None needed. Brennan settled across from Catherine. He placed his monogrammed portfolio before him, aligning it neatly. Ritual.
Control.
Then his voice filled the space. Before we begin, I want to establish that this meeting is in the spirit of good faith negotiation. All discussion is confidential. Nothing here is an admission of wrongdoing by my clients. Catherine's reply was cool.
Sharp.
Understood. Though given the evidence in our possession, the matter of wrongdoing seems rather settled. A flicker tightened Brennan's expression, the smallest crack in his composure. Miss Wu, he said smoothly. Inflammatory language won't facilitate productive discussion. Neither will pretense, she countered without missing a beat. The facts are clear. Judge Mercer and Mrs. Mercer diverted approximately $5 million from a trust created explicitly for Olivia Mercer's benefit. They acted under a power of attorney obtained through misrepresentation. Those funds were redirected to accounts benefiting Rebecca Mercer without Olivia's knowledge or consent. My father shifted in his chair, throat clearing as if to respond. Elliot, Brennan murmured quietly a warning. Let me handle this. My father's jaw flexed, but he obeyed, silenced in his own defense. The restraint only underscored his fury. My mother reached for the crystal pitcher. Her hand trembled as she poured. The clink of ice against glass was the only sound for a moment. My clients acknowledged financial decisions were made. Brennan continued smoothly. But they were made in good faith, with the family's best interests in mind, balancing immediate needs. Let's be precise. The Eleanor and Robert Mercer Trust was created for one beneficiary, Olivia Mercer, known as a family fund, not as a slush account for Judge Mercer to allocate as he saw fit. The trust was established when Miss Mercer was a child, Brennan said, his tone carefully even. Her grandparents could not have foreseen the exact educational or professional paths their granddaughters might pursue. As trustees, Judge and Mrs. Mercer had a duty to interpret the trust's intent in light of evolving circumstances. Catherine slid a document from her portfolio. It gleamed under the fluorescent lights, protected in a plastic sleeve. She placed it on the table with deliberate care. Perhaps this will clarify the grantor's intentions, Catherine said, sliding a letter across the polished rosewood table. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. It was my grandmother's handwriting. Instructions meant for me, to be delivered the day I assumed control of the trust. The words she had written years ago, words she wanted me to carry as guidance, not as evidence in a courtroom battle. My father didn't move. He didn't need to. His silence told me everything. He had seen this letter before. He had chosen to bury it, to withhold it. My mother reached for it. Perfectly manicured fingers drew the page closer. Her eyes scanned the familiar loops and curves of her mother-in-law's hand. And then, her face drained of color. You weren't supposed to see this yet, she whispered, as if she had forgotten where she was. Not until Rebecca's education was settled. Brennan cut in, his voice sharp, his eyes flashing her a warning. But the words had already escaped. The admission hung heavy between us. A quiet confirmation of what I had suspected. They had deliberately delayed my inheritance, sacrificed my autonomy, that my grandmother's will to fund my sister's ambitions. Brennan leaned forward, shifting strategy with a lawyer's precision. Let's be practical. What is it you want, Olivia? Surely not a drawn-out legal war that tears your family apart. Not public exposure that tarnishes your father's reputation, and by extension, your own career. There must be a private way forward. A resolution everyone can live with. Before Catherine could answer, I spoke. My voice was steady.
Clear.
I want what was taken from me. Every dollar. With interest. I want acknowledgement of the wrong that was done. I want assurance that Rebecca's education won't suffer because of this correction. And I want it resolved quietly, not to protect my father's reputation, but to protect my grandparents' memory from being dragged through the mud. My father's mask finally cracked. This is absurd. You speak as though we stole from you. As though we acted out of malice. We made decisions based on judgment. On the potential we saw. His tone carried authority, but it was hollow. My sister's medical career is not more valuable than my work in architecture. I shot back. That's the lie at the heart of this. You decided her path was worthy of sacrifice, and mine was not. And you decided long before either of us had proved anything. My mother stiffened. We supported your education. My undergraduate degree was paid mostly through scholarships I earned myself, I said. My voice grew sharper. My graduate degree was built on loans I'm still paying back. Meanwhile, Rebecca has never seen a FAFSA form, never balanced a debt-to-income ratio. This disparity was a necessity. It was design. Brennan's voice slid back in, smooth as glass. These family matters, while deeply important to you, aren't the issue at hand. Let's return to resolution. What exact terms would you accept to end this without litigation? Catherine's reply was crisp.
Precise.
Full restoration of the funds, plus 6% annual interest. Appointment of an independent trustee to manage assets going forward. Reimbursement of all legal fees. And a formal acknowledgement of breach of fiduciary duty. My father's voice dropped low. This is extortion. No, Elliot, my mother said softly. And for the first time, she surprised everyone at the table. Her tone carried something I hadn't heard in years. Truth. It's accountability. She turned to me. Her eyes met mine. And for the first time in years, she actually looked at me. We convinced ourselves we were making sound choices, she admitted. That allocating resources based on perceived potential was responsible parenting. But we never questioned the bias in those judgments. Why we always saw more promise in Rebecca's path than in yours. My father stared at her, blindsided by this betrayal of their united front. Caroline, this is neither the time nor the place. It's exactly the time, she said, her voice firm now, rising with each word. Before lawyers turn this into numbers on a page. Before we pretend this was a misunderstanding.
She drew in a breath.
Her words landed like stones. We favored Rebecca. Always. We justified it. Told ourselves she needed more. That she was less self-sufficient than you. That her field demanded greater sacrifice. But the truth is uglier. We poured our money, our approval, into the daughter who reflected our own prejudices. And we trained you to accept less. The room froze. Silence pressed in, thick and unrelenting. Catherine kept her composure, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, shock. She hadn't expected this confession. Neither had I. My father's face reddened. Fury. Embarrassment. Maybe even shame. But he said nothing. This is inappropriate, he snapped finally. We're here to settle finances, not dissect emotions. My mother's voice cut through him, like a blade. The finances were the emotions. They were the manifestation of what we believed about our daughters. Olivia deserves more than numbers. She deserves the truth. Her gaze locked on me. I won't ask you to forgive me. What we did was unforgivable. Not just the money. The years of messaging. The way we shaped your sense of self. What you thought you were worth. I can only tell you that I see it now.
And I am sorry. Deeply. Completely.
The apology hit me harder than I expected. Not because it fixed anything, it didn't, but because it stripped away the armor I had built in preparation for denial, for gaslighting, for excuses. Instead, here was the raw truth. The acknowledgement I had needed my whole life, but never thought I'd hear. I hadn't prepared for this. Not for acknowledgement. Not for contrition. Least of all from my mother. The woman who had spent her life standing silently behind my father's shadow, echoing his judgments as if they were her own. "Caroline, that's enough," my father snapped, his tone sharp, the same iron edge he must have used to silence outbursts in his courtroom. But my mother didn't flinch. Her voice, steadier now, cut across his authority.
No, Elliot.
"It isn't enough. It isn't nearly enough." She straightened in her chair, her back rigid, her chin lifted as if reclaiming something she had lost years ago. Turning to Brennan, she said clearly, "We will accept the terms as they stand. The funds will be restored in full, with interest. The legal fees will be covered, and the acknowledgement will be made." Brennan blinked. For the first time in the meeting, the seasoned attorney looked unsettled. His eyes darted to my father, waiting for the judge to reclaim control, to reverse the sudden unraveling of their defense. But my father, Judge Elliot Mercer, saw what I saw. The walls had collapsed around him, evidence stacked against him, his wife breaking ranks, his daughter unshaken, his kingdom of control reduced to rubble. His face hardened, his jaw locked, and finally, through clenched teeth, "Draft the agreement. We'll settle." Catherine allowed herself the smallest curve of a smile. A victory smile, but measured. "Wise decision," she said evenly. "We'll expect the first transfer within 5 business days, as a demonstration of good faith." "Fine," my father snapped. His voice was clipped, stripped of authority. "Is there anything else?" I turned to face him fully. For the first time since he'd entered the room, I let myself look at him. Really look at him. The man who had defined authority for me. The man who had shaped my sense of justice. The man who had trained me, through years of subtle signals, to expect less for myself while my sister received more. "Yes," I said softly. My voice carried across the room like a blade. "There is one more thing." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "Tell me this, Father. If I hadn't uncovered the truth, would you have ever told me? Would you have ever intended for me to receive what was mine? Or would you have continued redirecting everything until nothing remained?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed. I could see the gears turning, the calculation, the weighing of what to admit, what to preserve. Finally, he spoke. "We would have told you eventually. Once Rebecca's education was secured. Once the most pressing obligations were met. How much would have been left?" I pressed. A long pause. Then his evasive reply. "Enough. A reasonable portion." "A reasonable portion," I echoed. My voice was bitter. "How generous of you. A reasonable portion of my own inheritance." The words hung heavy in the room. My mother reached across the table. Her hand hovered near mine, not quite touching. "Olivia," she whispered, "I know this doesn't undo the past. But I need you to hear me. I see now how wrong we were. Not just about the money. About everything. The way we supported you. The expectations we placed on you. The way we convinced you to expect so little from us and from yourself." I pulled my hand back slightly. "Not ready. Not yet." "You're right," I told her. "It doesn't change what happened. But it's a start." The meeting ended with arrangements for the settlement to be formalized. Papers to be drafted. Signatures to be collected. But the ink hadn't even touched the page before my father made one last attempt to seize control. "I hope you'll consider the impact on your sister," he said coldly. "Rebecca is innocent in all of this. Her education shouldn't suffer because of our mistake." I didn't hesitate. "I've already spoken to Rebecca," I said. "She understands what happened better than you think. And unlike you, I have no intention of punishing one daughter to benefit another. Her education will continue. The difference is it will be funded honestly, with her knowledge, with her consent, not through deception and theft." Silence followed. My father had no reply. As Catherine and I rode the elevator down from the 37th floor, leaving the cathedral of glass and leather behind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. The kind that comes after a storm finally breaks. "That went better than expected," Catherine remarked, her voice calm but carrying a note of admiration. "Your mother's intervention was rare. Family disputes don't often feature such raw admissions." She surprised me too, I admitted. I always thought of her as an extension of my father, not someone capable of her own reckoning. People can surprise you, Catherine said, especially when they're forced to face evidence they can no longer deny. She paused, then added, "The question is, where do you go from here? The money will come back. But what about the relationships?" It was the question I had avoided all along. What kind of relationship could I have with parents who had betrayed me so deliberately? With a sister who, even if innocent, had benefited from that betrayal? I don't know yet, I said honestly. Restoration isn't the same as reconstruction. When we stepped into the sunlight, the city stretched out before me, sharp and dazzling. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free, not just financially, psychologically. Free from the weight of my parents' selective approval. Free from the narrative of scarcity and limitation that had shaped me since childhood. The architect in me recognized the moment instantly. This wasn't the end of a renovation. This was demolition. The ground cleared. The foundations laid bare. The question now was simple but enormous. What would I build? What would rise in the place of what had been torn down? For the first time, the answer belonged entirely to me. What I had reclaimed was not just money. It was possibility. The stolen years of narrowed horizons. The risks I never took. The ambitions I buried. The parts of myself I had silenced because I believed the lie that my dreams deserved only minimal investment. Now, as I stepped toward a future of my own design, I carried more than financial security. I carried the most vital truth of all, that I had always been worthy. Worthy of investment. Worthy of opportunity. Worthy of belief. The trust fund would be restored. But the greater restoration had already happened, inside me. My trust in myself. In my own value. In my right to claim the full measure of my potential. That foundation was rebuilt, stronger than anything money could ever buy. The settlement unfolded with a precision that startled me. Within 3 weeks, the first transfer appeared. $1.2 million traced back through the investment shells where my father had hidden my inheritance. Reclaimed. Mine again. The rest would follow in 2 installments. Another $1.3 million plus interest, restored piece by piece like bricks being returned to a wall that had once been torn down. Catherine had fought for safeguards I hadn't even known to ask for. An independent trustee, someone untangled from my family's corruption, would oversee the funds until the transfer was complete. That trustee was Jordan Lawson, a man whose reputation was built on integrity in a field where integrity was rare. He called me every week with updates. His voice calm, his reports precise, his transparency a stark contrast to the secrecy that had defined my parents' handling of the money. "The second transfer is scheduled for Friday," he said during our third call. "Another $800,000 plus accrued interest. The funds are coming from your sister's trust. Reduced, yes, but not eliminated. Sufficient capital remains for her to finish medical school without additional debt. That provision had been mine. My demand. Not to protect my parents' finances, but to shield Rebecca. She should not be punished for their betrayal. Her education would continue without interruption. The restoration of my inheritance didn't require the destruction of hers. It was balance. Justice without cruelty. And the formal acknowledgement? I asked. That document mattered to me more than the money. The written statement they promised? "It's drafted," Jordan assured me. "Their counsel is reviewing it. Ms. Wu is coordinating the final language." The machinery of restitution turned like a clock.
Cold. Precise.
Efficient. My future was being recalibrated in spreadsheets, transfers, signatures. But healing doesn't follow that kind of order. As the legal process unfolded, my emotional reality unraveled. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded, and I was left weightless, untethered. For years, even in dysfunction, my family had been the scaffolding that held me upright. Now that scaffolding had collapsed, and the ground beneath me wasn't ground at all. It was illusion. I drifted between exhaustion and insomnia. Some nights, I couldn't close my eyes. Other days, I couldn't lift my head. Food lost its rhythm. Too much, then nothing at all. Places I knew felt strange, as if the world itself had shifted under my feet. My body carried the trauma my mind had tried to suppress during the legal war. "This is normal," said Dr. Elise Sharma, the therapist I had begun seeing weekly. On our third session, she leaned forward gently, her voice steady. "You've experienced a rupture of fundamental trust. Not just in your parents, in your perception of reality itself. The story you believed about your family, your role in it, your worth, that story is gone. It has to be rewritten." I stared at the painting behind her desk. Blues and grays, shapes twisting toward patterns that never quite resolved. Like my life. Familiar forms. No clear picture. I should feel vindicated. I admitted. I won. The money's coming back.
They were forced to admit what they did.
But instead, I feel hollow. Dr. Sharma nodded. Vindication is not love. Justice can't replace the unconditional support you should have received as a child. What you've gained is accountability. What you lost is something deeper. And justice doesn't heal that wound. Her words landed heavy. I swallowed. Then, how do I even begin? Every memory feels poisoned. Every choice I made, every comparison between Rebecca and me, every moment when they invested in her and not in me, it's all infected by their dishonesty. How do I move through that? "Start with this," she said. "Acknowledge that you were never wrong. Your perceptions were accurate. The inequity you felt, it was real. The different standards.
Real.
The favoritism.
Real.
They trained you to doubt yourself, to accept their narrative as truth. But your instincts were always correct." Her words cracked something open inside me. For years, I had doubted myself. I had smothered the flickers of recognition when I noticed how Rebecca's path was paved while mine was full of obstacles. I told myself I was imagining it. I believed their rationalizations. That Rebecca's field was more demanding. That she needed more support. But Dr. Sharma was right. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't me being sensitive. It was real. And they had gaslighted me into silence. The validation stung as much as it soothed. Because if I had been right all along, then I had wasted years carrying shame that was never mine to carry. For years, I let them sell me the lie. That Rebecca's ambitions matter more. That her path promised greater contributions to society, while mine was indulgence, a luxury hobby dressed as aspiration. I swallowed that narrative until it lived in me like marrow. I believed that wanting more made me selfish. That my dreams weren't worth the risk. And now, sitting across from Dr. Sharma, I finally said it aloud. They convinced me my desires were less worthy. That what I wanted didn't deserve investment. She let the silence breathe, then asked, steady and direct. "And now? Now that you see the manipulation for what it was, how does that change your understanding of your own ambitions?" Her question landed like glass shattering. Pieces of a truth I had been circling for months suddenly aligned into sharp focus. If my parents had deliberately diminished my potential to justify diverting resources to Rebecca, then their career guidance, their constant push for something practical, modest, secure, was not wisdom. It was sabotage. I leaned back, speaking slowly as if testing the ground beneath me. I think I built my entire career on their limitations, on their vision of who I should be. I chose conventional architecture over environmental design because they told me it was safer. I stayed at a firm that ignored my sustainability ideas because I didn't want to seem presumptuous. I let them box me in. Dr. Sharma didn't flinch. And if you remove their box, if you assumed your potential was boundless, just as they once claimed your sister's was, what would you pursue? The question tore open a door I had locked years ago. Behind it, waiting patiently, were the dreams I had stuffed into dark corners, wrapped in words like impractical and naive. The answer came with surprising ease. Environmental design. Not just green buildings. Regenerative architecture. Structures that heal damage instead of just minimizing harm. Buildings that breathe, that restore ecosystems, that give back more than they take. That's where my passion has always been. But I convinced myself it was too idealistic. Too niche. Convinced by whom? She asked. At first, my father. I could still hear his dismissive tone. He called it a luxury specialty during college. Something I could dabble in after proving myself with real work. My mother worried it wouldn't pay the bills. They never said no outright, but they made me doubt if my dreams deserved the same weight as Rebecca's. Exactly, Dr. Sharma said softly. They made you question if your ambitions were worthy of the same investment, the same risk. Her words unlocked something in me. Recognition. A weight I hadn't even known I was carrying seemed to lift, not just from my shoulders, but from my imagination itself. I exhaled. And I internalized it so deeply that even after I became financially independent, I still limited myself. I kept living inside their vision, not mine. That's how conditioning works, she explained. It outlives the circumstances that created it. You start policing yourself. The cage becomes internal. Her observation pierced me. My parents' theft of my inheritance had a number attached to it. A harm I could quantify. A wrong I could legally repair. But the theft of my self-belief? Their slow erosion of my sense of worth. Their insistence that my dreams were extravagant, unworthy, second class. That wound ran deeper. That wound had no ledger, no settlement. So what now? My voice cracked. The money's coming back. But how do I restore the confidence? The ambition? The possibility they stole? The same way you reclaimed your inheritance, Dr. Sharma said. Step by step. By naming what was taken. By examining how. And then deliberately rebuilding. But this process doesn't happen in court. It happens here. She tapped her hand lightly against her chest. Inside. I shook my head. That sounds overwhelming. It is, she admitted. But you've already started. The fact that you can see it clearly, speak it out loud, that means the restoration is underway. The real question is, how far are you willing to go? Will you reclaim not just your money, but your full potential? Her words followed me out of her office like a haunting refrain. That afternoon, walking through the city, I found myself staring at a small gallery window. Inside, mounted boards displayed bold visions for urban renewal. At the bottom of the sign was a name that stopped me cold. Helena Rosenthal, a pioneer in regenerative architecture, the very field I had once dared to dream about. She was giving a lecture series, workshops, limited attendance. Without hesitation, I stepped inside. Is registration still open? I asked the receptionist. She nodded cautiously. Yes, but space is tight. Capped at 30. I'll take a spot, I said, pulling out my credit card. A small act, maybe, but decisive. A step back toward myself. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Mom told me about the second transfer. Are you okay? Can we talk soon? I stared at the words, frozen between instinct and fear. We had barely spoken since the settlement began. Our conversations had been clipped, reduced to logistics. Nothing real. Nothing human. Part of me wanted to stay distant, to protect myself. But another part recognized the danger of isolation. Distance was just another cage, and this time, I'd be the one locking the door. I typed back. I'm okay. Things are proceeding as agreed. And yes, let's talk. Dinner tomorrow? Her reply was immediate. Name the place. I'll be there. We met at a small Ethiopian restaurant halfway between our apartments. Neutral ground. Rebecca arrived first. She looked different, less polished, less untouchable. Jeans. A simple sweater. Hair pulled back, stripped of her armor. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I should, I admitted. But avoiding each other doesn't change what happened. And we're the only ones who actually understand. She nodded. Her eyes were steady. So tell me, how are you really? Beyond the settlement. The question cracked me open. I'm in free fall, I confessed. Everything I thought I knew, our family, my place in it, it's all fiction. I'm trying to figure out who I am without their stories shaping me. She looked down, her voice soft. I understand that more than you think. Finding out my success was built on resources stolen from you, it's made me question everything too. Am I deserving of what I've achieved? Or was I just carried by advantages I never earned? Who am I without them? Her vulnerability mirrored my own. For the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, but as another casualty. Elevated instead of diminished, but still shaped by the same deception. I don't blame you, I said carefully. You didn't steal from me. You grew up inside their system, just like I did. But I accepted it, she countered. I never asked why. I never wondered why I had so much while you had so little. I told myself it was natural. I was complicit by my silence. Her honesty startled me. I had expected defensiveness. Excuses. Not this. Not her willingness to look unflinchingly at her own role. What happens now? She asked quietly. Between us. Can we rebuild? Or is it too late? I studied her face, the weight of her question heavy in the air. For the first time, I gave myself permission to answer honestly, without duty or guilt. I don't know. I think we need to build something new instead of patching up what was broken. But I'm not ready to give up on having a sister. Even if the sister I thought I had never really existed. Relief softened her features. I'd like that. To build something real this time. As we shared injera bread and stews served family style, our conversation shifted. Rebecca spoke of medical school, this time with awareness of the privilege that had carried her there. I told her about the Rosenthal series, the first step toward my long-buried dream. Her eyes lit up. You'd be incredible at that. I remember your sketches, those buildings that created energy, that breathed. You were doing that in high school. Your ideas were revolutionary even then. Her words landed like balm. A reminder that someone had seen me, even when our parents dismissed me. When we left the restaurant, something fragile but real had begun between us. Not reconciliation. Not yet. But the first honest bridge. A beginning built not on silence, but on truth. The night was warm, the air carrying that faint sweetness that only comes in early autumn. As I walked home, the rhythm of my footsteps matched the rhythm of my thoughts. For weeks, I had lived in a kind of freefall, cut loose from the family narrative that had once held me like gravity. At first, that suspension felt like terror. But tonight, I noticed something different. The fear had begun to shift. Freefall no longer felt like falling. It felt like flying. I realized I had been clinging to the wrong foundation all along. The ground I'd lost, the conditional support, the curated story of my place in the family, that ground was never worth standing on. What lay ahead was not a crash, but a landing of my own choosing. For the first time, I had the chance to build a life on terrain I chose for myself, shaped not by their vision of me, but by my own. And in that recognition, something stirred. Something I hadn't felt since the morning William Kensington's call fractured my old reality. Beneath the grief, beneath the anger, I felt it, liberation.
Small.
Fragile, but alive. The final transfer arrived one Wednesday morning in October. A line of numbers on a bank statement. Nearly $900,000 plus interest deposited into the trust account. The last piece. The restoration complete. After months of legal maneuvering, the inheritance that had been stolen was finally mine again. Catherine Wu called me personally to confirm. Congratulations, she said. Her voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the warmth behind it. The funds are ready to move into your direct control. Jordan will set up a final meeting. I swallowed hard. Thank you. For everything. You did the hard part, she replied. Standing up to family is harder than standing up to any court. Most people would have settled for less. I couldn't compromise, I said. Not when this was never about money. It was about worth. Her voice softened. That's why I took your case. Well done, Olivia. Your grandparents would be proud. When we hung up, I sat in silence at my desk, staring at the confirmation email. $2.7 million. Soon it would be mine to steward, mine to direct. For years I had lived paycheck to paycheck, agonizing over whether I could afford a conference, a piece of software, even a train ticket. And now, freedom. But more than freedom, it was vindication. Proof that my grandparents had seen me, had believed in me, had invested in the future they knew I could create. It wasn't just money restored. It was faith restored. And with it came a question heavier than any balance sheet. What would I build with it? That question lingered as I returned to my work at Harmon and Associates. My current project was a mid-rise apartment complex. Functional, marketable, safe, but soulless. My ideas for living systems and regenerative design had been sidelined again, replaced with safer, cheaper, more practical features. Marcus passed my desk, tossing a red-marked elevation drawing onto my keyboard. "Client wants brick facing instead of your living wall system," he said flatly. "Brick sells. Make the change by Thursday." I stared at the page, at the red slashes cutting across my vision. A wall that could have reduced energy costs, cleaned the air, created a breathing facade for the city, erased with a pen stroke. The living wall would cut utility costs by nearly 20%, I argued. It would improve health outcomes, increase biodiversity. "Client doesn't care," he interrupted. "Brick sells. Do it." He walked away, and in the silence he left behind, something clicked inside me. For years, I had accepted this. My vision dismissed. My values sidelined. Just as my parents had once convinced me my dreams were too idealistic. But now? Now I had options. Real ones. I opened my browser, typed in a name I had admired from a distance for years. Helena Rosenthal, Regenerative Design. Her website glowed with possibility. Buildings that created more energy than they consumed. Structures that purified water and restored ecosystems in the middle of cities. Architecture that didn't just minimize harm, it healed. And then I saw it. A job posting. Seeking architect passionate about regenerative design. Portland office. Hybrid possible. My heart pounded. This wasn't just a job. This was the alignment. The work I had been told was too niche, too risky. The work I had secretly sketched in notebooks late at night. I hesitated. Portland was across the country. The pay might be lower. The firm was smaller. My parents' voices rose in my head, practical, safe, secure. But another voice spoke louder now. You can afford to risk. You can afford to choose. By lunch, I had started drafting an application. My private research. My sideline proposals. My vision. This time it would not stay hidden. And then the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Portland area code. I froze. Answered. Olivia Mercer. "Miss Mercer, this is Cole Washington with Rosenthal Design Partners." His voice carried a soft southern lilt. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I gripped the phone tighter. "Not at all. Helena asked me to reach out. She attended your breakout session at the Sustainable Design Forum in Chicago last month. She was impressed with your approach to water systems and housing developments." I blinked. That session had been small, one I'd paid for out of pocket. My firm hadn't even acknowledged it. I didn't realize she was there, I admitted. Cole chuckled. "She has a way of showing up quietly. She especially noted your response about regenerative capacity. It's exactly what we believe in here." My pulse raced. I've followed her work for years. She's influenced so much of my thinking. "That's good to hear," he said. "We actually have a position open right now. Helena asked me to gauge your interest before we post it publicly. Would you be open to an interview?" I closed my eyes. It was happening. Not someday. Not maybe if things align. Now. "Yes," I said. My voice steadier than I felt. "I'd be honored." "Friday morning," Cole replied. "We'll send you the link." When the call ended, I sat back in my chair, stunned. For years, I had been swimming against the tide. And now, the current had shifted. Not because of family connections. Not because of obligation. But because someone who mattered in my field had recognized the value of my work. That evening, I met with Jordan Lawson to finalize the transfer of my funds. He laid out investment strategies, tax considerations, safe paths forward. Then he leaned back. Many clients feel pressure to make dramatic moves when they first receive an inheritance, he said. But don't rush. This money isn't just opportunity. It's responsibility.
Take time.
Decide what you want your life to look like. His words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. For the first time, I had choices. Real choices. Not the ones my parents allowed. Not the ones my firm tolerated. My choices. And I knew. Whatever came next, I would not waste them. Jordan's words carried a weight that stayed with me. How you deploy it should reflect carefully considered priorities, not reactive impulses.
He wasn't warning me.
He was guiding me. I leaned forward and told him about the call from Rosenthal Design Partners, about the possibility of Portland, about the risk of less money, but the chance to work in the one field that made my heart beat faster.
He didn't hesitate.
He nodded, calm, certain. That's exactly what financial security is meant to do, he said. It gives you room to choose alignment and growth over immediate reward. The buffer changes everything. What once felt risky becomes strategic. I thought of my parents. They'd call it impractical, I said. My voice carried no bitterness, only truth. Jordan's expression softened, though his words landed with quiet precision. With respect, your parents' financial judgment hasn't exactly proven sound. Their version of practicality is about preserving control, not about unlocking potential. It was a gentle rebuke, but it shook me, because it was true. Their advice had never been about what I could build, it was about what they wanted to keep me from building. That night, when I got home, a small box waited outside my apartment door. Plain brown paper. No return address. Inside, a book, Regenerative Architecture, Designing for Healing by Helena Rosenthal. A handwritten note slipped between its pages. Olivia, your work reached me at exactly the right moment. Our industry needs voices like yours. People who know that sustainability isn't about reducing harm, it's about restoring what's been broken. I look forward to our conversation Friday. This book outlines the principles that guide our practice. Your water integration concepts show you're already thinking along the same lines. With appreciation, Helena. I traced her signature with my fingertips. It wasn't just a book. It was a bridge, a signal, proof that someone I had admired from a distance not only saw my work, but believed in it. I stayed up all night reading. Her philosophy wasn't abstract, it was alive. Buildings as systems of healing. Architecture as a way of reconnecting humans with the earth that sustained them. Every page pulled at something deep in me, something that had been silenced by years of compromise. By dawn, the decision was clear. I would go after this opportunity, no matter the cost. The inheritance wasn't a cushion anymore. It was fuel. My grandparents hadn't left me money, so I could play it safe. They had left me freedom, so I could live fully. Friday morning came. My desk was cleared except for my portfolio and my grandmother's framed letter. Use it wisely, but don't be afraid to use it joyfully. I carried those words into the call. The screen flickered, and there she was. Helena Rosenthal. Silver hair. Eyes sharp as steel, yet softened by warmth. The kind of presence that fills a room even through pixels. Olivia Mercer, she said, smiling as if she already knew me. Thank you for making the time. I believe we have much to discuss about the future of regenerative design. It wasn't an interview.
It was a lifeline.
As I spoke, I felt the last pieces of my parents' narrative crumble. Their voice in my head, the one that said impractical, unrealistic, too much, faded. What replaced it was something stronger. Conviction. Worth. The knowledge that I had always been enough. Our conversation stretched well past the scheduled hour. She asked about climate adaptation, about architecture's social responsibilities, about how buildings could function not just as spaces, but as active ecosystems. When she turned the conversation to water, I came alive. I shared my designs, the ones I had sketched late at night when no one was watching. Urban housing where water flowed visibly through the structure. Filtration, function, and beauty intertwined. She leaned closer to the screen, her focus unblinking. Most architects treat water as a problem to solve, she said softly. You see it as connection, as value. I nodded. Water is the thread that binds systems together. It serves the practical, but it also creates emotion, sound, movement, reflection. It turns necessity into experience. By the end, her interest wasn't just curiosity. It was commitment. She made an offer. A senior design role in Portland. A project already waiting. Cascade Commons. A development centered on water-positive design. She wanted me to lead it. The pay would be less than Harmon and Associates. But profit sharing, autonomy, freedom to lead, not just execute. We'll need your response within 2 weeks, she said. Cole will send relocation resources. This project could be a signature showcase for your expertise. When the call ended, I sat in silence. Everything I'd ever wanted, once labeled impractical, now sat in front of me, concrete and real.
Terrifying.
Exhilarating. Portland was 3,000 miles away. A new world. A new life. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. 2 emails arrived almost back to back. One from Cole with relocation details, neighborhoods, cost estimates, support networks. The seriousness of their commitment steadied me. The second was from Jordan. My trust transition was finalized. My inheritance, every last cent, was now under my control. Perfect timing. On Monday, I requested a meeting with Diane Harmon herself. Junior architects didn't ask for that. But the assistant booked me for Wednesday. 30 minutes. Enough time to leave the firm on my own terms. I prepared everything. Transition plans. Documentation. Clean handoffs. Whatever my next step, I wanted to close this chapter with dignity. By Wednesday, I was ready. I walked into Diane's office at the exact minute of our appointment. My portfolio in one hand, the weight of a new beginning in the other. Her office was everything I expected. High ceilings, walls lined with awards, framed magazine covers, renderings of towers. A panorama of glass open to the streets below, filled with the very buildings she had shaped across 4 decades of practice. She turned from the window when I entered. Olivia. Her tone was polite, measured. This is an unusual request. How can I help you? I didn't hesitate. I placed my letter on her desk. I've received an offer from Rosenthal Design Partners. They want me to lead water integration strategies for their regenerative projects. I've come to formally resign. I've prepared complete transition documentation for all my assignments to make sure nothing is disrupted. For the first time in our years of polite exchanges, I saw her mask slip. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by calculation. At 62, Diane had weathered countless departures, yet she understood what this one meant. Losing a junior architect was routine. Losing one to Helena Rosenthal was not. She tapped the edge of my letter with her manicured nails. Rosenthal's operation is certainly innovative, she said evenly, but smaller, less established. Have you truly considered the long-term implications? We offer stability here. Security. With respect, I said quietly but firmly, my decision isn't about stability, or titles, or conventional advancement. It's about alignment between my work and my values. Something in my tone caught her attention. She studied me as if seeing me for the first time. I wasn't aware you felt so strongly about Rosenthal's methods. You've never advocated for them directly in our meetings. I met her eyes. I have. The Living Wall proposal for Westridge. Rainwater collection at Columbia Heights. Passive cooling systems at the University Research Center. I researched, designed, and presented every one of them. They were set aside for conventional systems. Her brow furrowed. Recognition slowly dawned. Those were yours? I assumed they came from our consultants. They didn't. My voice was steady, but the memory stung. They were mine. Credit was never made clear. She sat back, silence filling the space between us. I watched her wrestle with the realization of how easily innovation from younger architects was buried under hierarchy. That's unfortunate, she said at last, carefully. It's something we'll need to address. Perhaps a specialized role could be created for you here. A focus on regenerative systems.
Propera cognition.
Resources. Would that interest you? Months ago, I would have said yes. I would have seen it as a miracle, an opening of validation.
But not now.
Not after discovering my parents' manipulation. Not after reclaiming my inheritance. Not after Helena Rosenthal herself had reached across the distance to tell me my voice mattered. I shook my head gently. I appreciate the offer. But my decision isn't about a new title or a designated corner of a larger machine. Rosenthal's practice is built on principles that are central, not peripheral. I need to be in a place where regenerative design is the foundation, not the exception. For the first time, Diane's composure softened into something else. Respect. I understand. Still, established firms like ours hold influence because of our scale. We shape standards. That's worth considering. It is, I admitted. And maybe someday the industry will shift, and our paths will converge again. But for now, I need to be where the gap between words and action is smallest. The meeting ended with professionalism. She accepted my resignation, wished me well, and hoped our paths might cross again. But as I left her office, I felt something physical, almost tangible, lifting from my shoulders. Invisible chains I hadn't realized I carried. The weight of institutional restraint. Years of compromise that had pressed into me so deeply, I no longer noticed their pressure, until it was gone. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a storm and a celebration combined. Word spread. Colleagues stopped me in hallways. Some congratulated me with wide eyes, whispering about Rosenthal's reputation. Others tilted their heads, skeptical, questioning the practicality of uprooting for a boutique firm. Marcus, unsurprisingly, couldn't hide his discomfort. During a handoff meeting, he leaned back in his chair, smirk faintly tugging at his lips. Rosenthal's projects are interesting, but limited. Market impact is small. Most clients won't pay for those kinds of systems. That's changing, I replied evenly. Insurance companies are already offering premium reductions for resilient buildings. Cities are writing incentives into zoning for water-positive developments. The economics are shifting. He shrugged. Still a niche. You've built momentum here. A senior associate would be your next step. At a smaller firm, your career path is undefined. Risky. His words were cloaked in practicality, but I recognized their echo. The same refrain I had heard all my life. Safety over passion. Security over authenticity. Shrink your vision until it fits the mold. Don't stretch too far. Don't reach too high. But something inside me had already shifted. That narrative no longer belonged to me. I'm redefining success on my own terms, I told Marcus that day. The words came out calm, almost casual, but the truth behind them shook the ground under my feet. For years, I had measured myself against ladders someone else built. Promotions, salaries, titles. Now, for the first time, I was stepping off that track. Success, for me, meant alignment, integrity, living in sync with my core values rather than bowing to the safe formulas others had drawn for me. Outside the office, my days were consumed with preparation. Practical, but charged with meaning. I gave notice on my apartment. I mapped Portland neighborhoods, cross-referencing Cole's notes with my own instincts about where I could belong. Then came the harder task, sorting my life into boxes. Which possessions deserved to make the journey across the country? Which could I let go of, trusting that I would replace them later? The inheritance my grandparents had restored to me changed everything. Not only financially, but psychologically. It gave me freedom to make choices without the constant whisper of fear. I could rent temporary housing while searching for the right permanent home. I could ship the objects that carried my history rather than leaving them behind out of necessity. I could accept the pay adjustment at Rosenthal without the weight of panic. But deeper than that, this inheritance was a message. Proof that my grandparents believed in me. Proof that they saw me as worthy of investment, worthy of trust, worthy of a future. That belief, written into a financial bequest and my grandmother's letter, stood in sharp contrast to the message I had grown up with, that my dreams only deserved limited resources, that my potential was something to minimize rather than nurture. 1 week before my departure, Rebecca called. We'd kept contact minimal since our dinner, cordial, but cautious, both of us recognizing the need for space as our family patterns unraveled. "I heard you're moving to Portland," she said. "Mom mentioned it on our call." I blinked, surprised. My mother had barely spoken to me since the settlement, yet she was following my plans. "News travels fast," I murmured. Rebecca's tone softened. "Are you excited? Nervous?" "Both." "All of the above," I admitted. "The work is everything I've wanted. But starting over in a new city, building a life from the ground up, it's daunting." "I can imagine," she said. "Though, honestly, I've always admired how you adapt. Remember when we moved from Cincinnati to Boston for Dad's appointment? You adjusted right away. I fell apart over leaving my friends." Her memory pulled me back, 12-year-old me, holding her hand, making jokes to distract her while I kept my own tears hidden. She thought I was stronger. The truth? I had just learned that showing distress didn't bring comfort in our family. Only competence did. Different coping mechanisms, I told her quietly. Not different feelings. "That's insightful," she admitted after a pause. "I'm starting to realize how many of our supposed differences weren't really differences. Just strategies for surviving the same environment." Her words landed like a fragile breakthrough. Rebecca, the golden child, was beginning to see how false the pedestal had been. She wasn't inherently favored. She had simply been cast into a role that divided us. Then she surprised me. "Listen, I know things between us are still a work in progress. But I'd like to help with your move, if you'll let me. I have a break coming up, 5 days off rotations. I could fly out, help you pack. Even drive with you if you're taking the car instead of flying." I sat in stunned silence. It wasn't just an offer of help, it was investment. Time, energy, presence. Something I had rarely received from her before. "That's generous," I said carefully. "But wouldn't that disrupt your rotations? You've worked so hard to keep up." "Some things matter more than perfect attendance," she replied simply. "Like being there for my sister when she's starting over. Besides, I've never seen the northern route. Could be an adventure for both of us." Her phrasing shifted the ground again. Not obligation. Not sacrifice. An adventure. Something shared. Something equal. "I'd like that," I told her, feeling something uncoil inside me. I was planning to drive anyway, to bring the car, and see the country. Having company would make it better. We set plans. She'd arrive in a week. 2 days of packing. Then the long road west together. The conversation ended with a warmth that wasn't forced, wasn't fragile. It was real. A seed of connection, finally free of the manipulative soil we'd grown up in. After the call, I returned to sorting boxes. But everything felt different. Each decision, keep or discard, ship or replace, was no longer just about logistics. It was about identity, about claiming what parts of me I would carry into this new life. In just a few months, everything had shifted. From a junior architect starved of recognition to a senior designer at a firm that valued innovation. From constrained and dependent to financially free. From daughter begging scraps of approval to a woman reclaiming the full inheritance of her worth. This wasn't only a career change. It was a translation. I was learning a new language, the language of self-worth, of expectation, of deserved opportunity. I was replacing realistic with possible, practical with aligned, acceptable with extraordinary. It was unsettling, disorienting, at times overwhelming. But with every box packed, every plan finalized, every step closer to Portland, the language became more fluent, more natural, more mine. I wasn't just moving to a new city. I wasn't just changing jobs. I was becoming myself fully, finally.